Today's lesson is on Newton's first law. There are 3 laws in total, and this, I think, is the simplest and easiest of the 3. This side is just the section taken from the course content, just for your information. We have 2 objectives for today's lesson. The first is to be able to apply Newton's first law to explain the motion of objects moving with a uniform velocity and objects where the speed and/or direction changes. The second objective is to understand what is meant by the term inertia. So what is Newton's first law? Newton's first law states that an object will remain stationary or moving at a constant speed unless a resultant force acts upon it. That's obvious, really, because if you think about it, think of a drink on the table, okay, or a cup on a table. That cup is not going to move unless it is acted on by another force. It will stay there. And that is the principle behind Newton's first law. If an object is stationary, it will stay stationary until it is acted on by a resultant force. The other one, moving at a constant speed, you know from the previous work that we've done that if forces are balanced on an object, the object is either stationary or moving at a constant speed. So if Newton's first law applies to an object that's stationary, i.e. has balanced forces, the same is also going to apply to an object that is moving at a constant speed, i.e. has balanced forces acting upon it. So let's take this example. This ball is being held stationary by 2 taut strings. So there are opposing forces acting on it, denoted by F1 and F2. They are the same size force, even though they are acting in opposite directions. This means that the resultant force acting on the ball is 0. We know that if the resultant force is 0, the object is either stationary or moving at a constant speed. It isn't moving, so it is stationary. And it will remain stationary, it will remain in this position unless one of those forces change. This next example shows a van moving at a constant velocity. The driving force pushing it forward is the same as the opposing force, friction, acting in the opposite direction. The resultant force acting on the van is 0, and therefore it is moving at a constant speed. Newton's first law states that the van will continue to move like this until one of those forces change. So what happens if one of those forces does change? If a resultant force acts on an object, one of 5 things can happen to it. It can either start moving, it can stop, it can change direction, it can speed up, or it can slow down. This, however, is not Newton's first law. As soon as there is a resultant force acting on it, this leads us into Newton's second law, which is covered by our next lesson. So looking at this example, which is example 1 continued, if one of the hands lets go of the string, then the only force acting on the string is the force coming from the right-hand hand, which is F2. This will then cause the ball to accelerate in that direction. The forces are no longer balanced. Newton's first law comes together to give us the term of inertia. Inertia is the resistance of any physical object to any change in its velocity. This includes changes to the object's speed or direction of motion. What does that mean? It basically means how hard is it to change the motion of an object. So as I said, this first section is very small, Newton's first law. So let's just summarise before you go on to do the practice questions. Newton's first law quite simply says that an object, a stationary object, or an object moving at a constant speed will remain in that same state unless acted on by a resultant force. Now please go carry on and work through the questions and make sure you green pen your answers.